This is chicken tortilla soup starter, and it's my most coveted freezer item that I make and preserve every year. And this is chicken tortilla soup, which is my absolute favorite soup. It is served over crushed tortilla chips and topped with cheese and sour cream and cilantro if you like. And the best part is that with a bag of starter in the freezer, I can have this dinner on the table ready to go in about 10 minutes. And I love to squirrel away as many bags of soup starter as I possibly can every summer when the garden is just bursting with vegetables. And I love that it uses what we're growing here, what we're growing fresh. Everything from garlic and onions to peppers, tomatoes, even sweet corn. And it's taking what's in abundance now and preserving it in a really useful way that come wintertime, all I have to do is thaw a bag of starter, add some cooked chicken, some broth, and a can of beans, and I have almost an instant dinner that is just reminiscent of summertime and sunshine, and it's so delicious. I'm going to show you how I make it. Okay, so here's what you'll need, and if this looks like a lot of vegetables, that's because I'm making a triple batch, but you're welcome to decrease it and make a double or single if you want. You'll need tomatoes, and I really like Roma or paste tomatoes, some beautiful sweet corn, and then onions, of course, because every good soup has a lot of onions in it. And then some peppers, lots of peppers. I really love poblanos in this. I think they give it a really great flavor, so I have a few of those. And then bell peppers as well. I'm using a few different colors here. I have orange, red, and green bell peppers. And then just a few jalapenos too. And by the way, I'll put the link to the written recipe in the video description below. I'm also using garlic, lots of garlic, and then a couple pantry items, olive oil, tomato paste that just helps thicken it up, and taco seasoning, which gives it a nice well-rounded flavor. The first step is to get chopping. There's going to be a lot of chopping here, and while you could use a food processor for the peppers and the onions, I don't prefer it. I really love the look and the feel of a hand-cut vegetable. So I do it the old-fashioned way with a good sharp knife, and if you are going to be cutting this many vegetables, a really nice knife is a good investment. And I'm just going for kind of a medium dice here, not too big and not too small. And same for the onions, I'm going for kind of a medium chunky piece, and I'm cutting these as fast as I can because with this many onions and this fresh of onions, they are burning my eyes, tears are streaming down my face, which you can't see. But anyways, one word of caution, if you are going to use a food processor here, just make sure that you're not cutting everything too small. You definitely do want kind of a bigger chunky pieces for this. Now, once you have all the peppers and all of the onions cut up, get them into a big pot over medium heat, drizzle in some olive oil or whatever cooking fat you like to use, and get these cooking and softening up. And because I have so much volume of vegetables in here, this is going to take probably about 15 minutes at least until all these vegetables are soft. And look at how beautiful they are. I just love all of these colors. And while that cooks, I'm going to get started chopping the next wave of vegetables, which is the garlic and tomatoes. And for the garlic, I like it pretty small, so I'm just going to keep running my knife through this until it's a nice fine minced garlic. And then I'm going to move it to the side of my cutting board and make room for all of the tomato chopping that's about to happen. And as far as the tomatoes go, I really love Roma or paste tomatoes for this because they're so meaty. They have a lot more body and bulk to them than they do seeds, unlike a lot of the typical slicing or beefsteak tomatoes, which have more seeds inside. But you can use whatever you have. Just don't use cherry tomatoes for this. I wouldn't use those. For the size here, I'm doing a nice medium dice, not like painstakingly small, but not too big either. Because remember, these are going to cook down a little bit, so I think that this is about perfect. The onions and peppers are looking great. These have just been cooking away over here, and I've stirred them a couple times. I like to keep them moving in the pot a bit, and they're perfectly tender. You can see how soft they are. They're not overcooked. And now that they're done, I'm going to add the next wave of ingredients, which is the garlic and the tomatoes that we just finished chopping. This is just basically a big cycle of chop a bunch of stuff and add it to the pot, and then when you have more room on your cutting board, you can cut some more stuff and add that to the pot. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going to get these stirred around and get them cooking. Also at this time, after the garlic and the tomatoes are stirred in, I'm going to add the tomato paste and the taco seasoning. Give this a good stir again and just let it simmer over medium heat until the tomatoes are softened, which should take about 10 minutes. And you guessed it, while that cooks, more cutting, but don't worry, we're almost done here. This is the last thing. This is just raw sweet corn that I'm cutting off the cob, and if you've never done this before, you want to cut it so deeply that you cut most of the kernels off whole, but not so deeply that you're cutting into the cob. Back to the pot. This is looking really great. The tomatoes have softened. They've released a lot of their liquid and everything looks really soupy. The flavors are all mingling and it's just really beautiful. Doesn't this just look lovely? And the final step is to add the corn. The corn only needs to cook for about 10 minutes, so I'm just gonna let this continue simmering away. And that's it, the corn is tender, this is done, and the next step is to let it cool completely and then chill it in the fridge and get it ready for freezing. And because this was a triple batch, I am going to divide it evenly between 3-quart freezer bags and get it into the freezer. And then next, I will show you how to cook it up into soup. And here's what it looks like once it's frozen. I just love putting up high value items like this. Not only is this full of so many homegrown vegetables, it's incredibly delicious and it makes getting dinner on the table really fast and easy. Now to make the actual chicken tortilla soup, you'll need a bag of frozen starter that you've thawed or at least partially thawed and some cooked chicken. I'm using chicken thighs that I baked and chopped up just for this. You can use chicken breast, you can use leftover rotisserie chicken or roasted chicken, whatever you have. And then broth. I'm using my homemade chicken broth. And then last is a can of beans, which I'm going to drain and rinse. One thing that I like to do is to let the starter thaw for just an hour or two, and I usually throw it right in my soup pot just to catch any liquid that might leak out of it. But then it comes out of the bag a lot easier as a chunk of ice, and I often snip the top corners of the bag so that that ice block can just kind of fall right out. One of my favorite things about this recipe is that the ingredients don't have to be totally thawed before you make it. You can see they're my big chunk of ice in my broth. And that means that I can take these things out of the freezer just a couple hours before dinner and I don't have to think that far ahead. And to get this going, I'm just combining the broth and the starter in my soup pot over medium heat, and I'm gonna let it cook until it comes to just a gentle simmer. And once it's warm, I'll add in the chicken, and I'm using about 4 cups of chicken. I like a pretty meaty soup, but if you like less, you can use a little bit less here. I'm also going to add in the beans now. I almost always use black beans because they're my favorite for this soup, but you could use pinto beans or even kidney beans if that's what you have. I'll give it a good stir and let it keep cooking until the chicken and beans are heated through about 5 more minutes. Soup is done. I tasted it and salted it, and I'm going to gather all my fixings and get ready to ladle it into the bowls. And for serving, step 1 is to get some tortilla chips and crush them just lightly into the bottom of your bowl. And then ladle the soup over top. And the tortilla chips are going to get kind of softened, and they're really, really good that way. Now, that's how I like to eat it. Carl likes to not do this and instead just have the tortilla chips on the side and dip them in. So however you prefer, but I really like it this way. I think it's one of those things where you can't knock it until you try it. And if you haven't tried it, you definitely should. Next comes the shredded cheese, which is going to melt into the top of the soup and get all nice and gooey. After that, a little dollop of sour cream, however much you like. And then I like to put a lot of fresh chopped cilantro on mine, but if you're one of those people who thinks cilantro tastes like soap, you could go ahead and leave it off. And that's it. That is chicken tortilla soup from Frozen Soup Starter. Doesn't it look just so delicious? It really is our favorite soup. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and if you found this video helpful, I would love it if you could give it a thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe to my channel so that you are the first to know whenever a new video is posted.